So welcome everyone. Welcome to Arts Plus Change, hosted by the University of Rochester's Institute for Performing Arts in partnership with the Office of Equity and Inclusion, the Paul J. Burgett Intercultural Center, 540 West Main, Create a Space Now, Eastman Institute for Music Leadership, the Warner School, and the Rochester Fringe Festival. My name is Ann Harris Wilcox, and my pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm your conference host for this session with Katie Hurwitz. We would like to acknowledge with respect the Seneca Nation, known as the Great Hill People and keepers of the Western Door of the Haudenosaunee. We take this opportunity to thank our original caretakers, whose ancestral lands, the University of Rochester, currently resides in Rochester, New York. As we come together, we want to honor the many lives tragically taken too soon in recent events, by acknowledging the need for commitment to constant action and attention surrounding the systemic issues that continue to impact each of us to this day. While we have encouraged each presenter to make every effort to create brave space and safe space, we would like to encourage you to attend these sessions in the way that you need to attend. While we know that discomfort allows for growth, we would like to remind you that you have agency to make decisions that keep you safe as we embark on potentially difficult content and discussions. As we are all here to learn and grow, we welcome you to challenge ideas, but ask you to agree to challenge the idea and not the person. We also want to remind you that individual presenters' views do not necessarily represent the official ideas or beliefs of the University of Rochester, the Institute of Performing Arts, or its partners. In order to enable live transcription in your Zoom view, please click the arrow to the right of the live transcript box to view, and this box can also be dragged to another location on your screen if necessary. We are recording today's session, so please take note that your spoken, written comments and image may be included as well as the transcript. In order to be identified by first name only, we invite you to protect your privacy. We invite you to rename yourself on Zoom with your pronouns if you feel comfortable. Breakout rooms will not be recorded. Because we have back-to-back sessions scheduled, this session will end promptly at its end time. We encourage presenters and participants to share contact information via the chat to foster continued discussion and connection where desired. This cluster will end with a 15-minute open discussion of all sessions. So there's one more session and then the discussion will happen. For our social media users, please use hashtag ArtsChange22 if you feel inspired by something you hear or experience today. So the good part, thank you for joining us. And I am now honored to welcome Katie Hurwitz, who is presenting this morning a guided discussion on promoting translated literature in elementary schools. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming today. It means so much to see you guys here. So thank you for joining me in this discussion, a guided discussion on promoting translated literature in elementary schools. I'll be facilitating the discussion today, and together we'll come together to listen, consider, share, and act in the brave space. And I'd encourage all of you to participate and share your insights and experiences in whatever fashion you'd like to do, whether it's raising your hand, using the function to do that, unmuting yourself, and speaking whenever, utilizing the chat, or whatever you see fit. Talking about the chat, I have just put in a link to a Google Doc. This is our collaboration and resources doc that we'll be using throughout the discussion today. As for now, just the only thing you need to pay attention to is just the box at the top in case you want to write down anything at all. If not, that's okay too. And in order to ensure that this is a safe and comfortable space, I thought I would tell a literary joke right away to break the ice. So here we go. What do you call a weekend entirely full of reading? Booked. Yeah. Hopefully that that gets the nerves out a little bit. So I'll tell you a little bit about myself. My name's Katie Hurwitz. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm a rising senior at the University of Rochester in the class of 2023. And to my knowledge, I think I'm the only current undergraduate voice presenting. So I'm hoping that gives me a unique voice. And I'm learning about this topic as much as all of you are. And so I don't claim expertise on it, but I thought, introducing this topic to you guys would be great and prompting discussion. A little bit about my background. In 2019, I started off my college experience at Salve Regina University, which is a beautiful small school in Newport, Rhode Island. And then in 2020, in order to broaden my educational experience through more diversity, multiculturalism, and opportunities to work for social justice, I transferred here to the University of Rochester. A significant reason was because I was accepted into the Guaranteed Rochester Accelerated Degree in Education program at the Warner School of Education. So I'll be starting there after I graduate undergrad, and I'd be studying childhood education and TESOL. And then as an undergraduate student, I decided Rochester would be a great place to globalize my studies of my two main passions, which are music and the literary arts. So in music, I became a music and world cultures track major. And then with creative writing, I chose creative writing and world literature as a multidisciplinary study approach. So last year, I gave a presentation here about equitable music pedagogy and El Sistema inspired programs. So this year, I thought I would focus on my other passion of literary arts and talk about translated literature, specifically relating to pedagogy, translated children's literature. And this is a very niche topic, and I feel like it's not talked about a lot. So how did I get to learn about it? How was I introduced into this community? Well, back in spring 2021, I took a course offered at University of Rochester called Comparative Literature 284, Translation in World Literature, run by Chad Post, who is the director of Open Letter Books, which is really cool because University of Rochester hosts one of the they're one of the first publishers in the U.S. that publishes translated literature. And so then in that summer, through the Humanities for Life program, I started interning there as a editorial intern. And I was really interested specifically in children's literature. So I talked to Chad about this, and he told me, oh, there's this organization in the UK called Outside in World, and they're focused specifically on promoting children's literature and translation. So you should reach out to them. And I did, and one of the trustees here is here today, Patricia Billings, and she's my advisor for my internship with Outside in World, which I had started in the fall semester 2021, and I'm continuing to do that to this day, and I'll continue through August. And that has been a wonderful, lovely experience, as I have read around 30 children's books so far in translation, and have written reviews on them, and written an article about one of the publishers, Enchanted Lion, which I'll share about that with you today. But that's enough about me. I would love to learn about you a little bit. So we're going to do this in two ways. First, I think it would be good if we can go around and unmute yourselves and say these following things. So say hi or greeting in whatever language you choose, because this is about languages today. Your name, your pronouns, and where you are joining us from. I'm not sure the best way to go about this. Maybe just unmute yourself as you see fit. So maybe start with Anne.
Great. Hi. Yes, I'm Anne. I go by she, her, hers. And as we said in the intro, I am sitting here in Rochester, which is the western door of the Haudenosaunee. Do I popcorn it, or do you want to pick someone else?
Whoever wants to go can go.
I'll go, Katie. Oh, I see Joan and Eric. Go ahead, Joan and Eric.
Hi, I'm Eric Hurwitz. This is Joan Hurwitz.
Hi.
Emily
Hi.
Hurwitz, and we're right here in Walpole, Massachusetts.
Yeah, and we're Katie's family.
Yep.
And very proud of her.
Oh, it's so awesome to meet you. Yeah, I'm Patricia Billings. Thank you for the intro, Katie. And I go by she, her, and I'm coming in from Izmir, Turkey. And in fact, because our company, Millet Publishing, we publish translated literature and bilingual literature. My partner in the business is Turkish. And behind me is a blown up image from a book that was translated from Turkish to English and then adapted for children. It's called The Dance of the Eagle and the Fish. And yeah, so this is a lovely image from it. And Katie's amazing and I'm super happy to be here.
My name is Otto. Hi, I use he, him, his. And I'm joining from Plainfield, Vermont, which is on unceded Abenaki land.
Hello, bonjour. My name is Missy. And my pronouns are she, her, and I'm also outside of Rochester today and land of the Haudenosaunee.
Hi, my name is Hannah. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm also coming from Rochester today.
Hello, I'm Meina. I'm from China. The Chinese say hello is 你好. And my pronoun is she, her, and I'm in my apartment of Rochester today.
Hello, I'm Jenny. Pronoun she, her, and I'm from, right now I'm in my house in New York City.
Perfect. That was everyone, correct? Perfect. Okay, this is great. If you would like the opportunity to share more about yourself, I have these questions, and if you would like to answer them in the chat, feel free. So basically, who are you? What do you do? So for me, I am a student. Why did you join us today? Well, for me, I'm presenting. That's why. And what are you looking forward to discussing today? You can type that out if you feel like you would like to. And it's funny, I forgot to say I'm currently in Massachusetts. I'm directly under where my family is watching from, downstairs. So without further ado, I think we should start discussing something about translated literature. So this is a space where we will share our pre-existing knowledge of translated theory, translated children's literature, and the US school system as it relates to elementary schools. So a question that I will ask first is a true or false question. So true or false? There are instances where it is truly impossible to translate words in one language to another.
How do you want us to respond, Katie?
With any way that you feel fit. If you'd like to unmute yourself, that might be the easiest right now.
I'm gonna say it's true.
Yeah, actually, let's type in the chat, true or false. What do people think?
I think it could be both. It depends on what kind of it depends on the meaning and what you would like to transfer. From my experience, because English is not my first language, so I always need to translate between English and Chinese. It's challenging. So sometimes I can find you know, for example, Coca-Cola in China, we say it 可口可乐, so the pronunciation is very similar. And sometimes I can find the exact meaning in English to express the Chinese and vice versa. So I think it's both false and true.
Thank you for that. maybe one other person, if you'd like to share your reasoning.
Well, I would just add that sometimes when that translation seems impossible, the body takes over. And so we do it through posturing or image of if there's an illustration that helps that translation.
I love that answer as well. See, like with children's literature, a lot of the times you'll get picture books. And with the picture books, you can kind of omit the words and you might still be able to tell what the meaning could be based on how the illustrations are. My understanding of this statement is that, of course, we always hear about there's some words that you can never translate from one language to another. And that might be true for direct words. So there might be one word that just describes this incredible feeling that we don't have a word for in English. But at the same time, you can use more words than one. You can use like an entire sentence to translate something. So I think the answer true-ish is probably a good answer. I think we should talk about a little bit, how do you understand translations? Are any of you translators? Who are translators? What do they do? What is the goal of translating? And does translating apply to just words? That was a lot. I'll put it all in the chat so you can see what I just asked. Does anybody have any responses to that?
Well, I'll go because, as you know, I'm not a translator, but I've worked with many, many translators very gratefully. And so I think I'll answer the last question first because it's something, you know, Katie, I'm really, you know, I really think deeply about, which is with translating children's picture books, is that when you're doing like a composite work like that, even if when you're the translator, right? Like we would never ask a translator to translate a text of a children's picture book without showing them the images, right? So we wait till we have an illustration draft because that will affect and inflect how they translate. So when it's a picture book, you're sort of delivering over to another language, say to English, right, from Turkish, for instance, like a whole sensory experience, right? And so I think there's a really deep interaction between the text and the images, especially with regard to a picture book. And, you know, hearing translators over the decades talking about this, it really does impact how they translate. And also sometimes they'll make suggestions to publishers, you know, based upon what they're seeing in image. Is this going to work in this market? And so on and so forth. So I do think that the when you're translating text, if it's something that's accompanied by pictures, you're carrying over the pictures as well.
Yeah, thank you so much for that wonderful perspective. Would anyone else like to take a tackle of answering these questions?
I have a friend who's done a lot of translation, and I think one thing that she has conveyed to me is that the translator is imparting the culture, not just the words. So because with words, there's a whole layer of contextual understanding. And so she sees that that's also a part of her responsibility as a translator.
Definitely. And when translators look at works, they have to decide whether they want to kind of pay homage to the original author or writer and translate it as directly as possible, or if they want to look at the culture of the people who are going to be reading it in the new language and see how they can best understand it. So it's really a work of art. As Chad Post said, translators are curators, almost like if you're a director of a movie and get to decide how you want the story to translate. This is another way of translating, to translate into visual art from a written script, how you can do it when doing words to words in one language to another. On the topic of children's literature in particular, do you know of any children's books off the top of your head that have been translated from other languages into English? Maybe that you read as a child or in school? There are quite a few, and you might not know it.
I think the sweatshirt that you're wearing is an illustration of a translated book. I don't know if any of you can see it, but Katie, why don't you say what that is and what language, from which language and culture that became?
Yeah, good. Yeah, exactly. The Little Prince. Yes. It is translated from French.
Yeah, I so interesting. So coincidence. So yesterday I downloaded the book, the ebook from The Little Prince online. So because I plan to create a children illustration in the following months, so I have already input this in your Google form. Yeah. So I know Little Prince. And I also like the Heidi. Yeah,
Yes,
very much.
exactly. Translated from German.
And Pinocchio.
Exactly. Yeah.
Pinocchio, the Grimm's fairy tales, I think. Yeah, quite a lot of classics, which of course I didn't know when I was growing up, and some of it seemed quite yeah, it, like sort of decontextualized, although you were, yeah, very interesting.
Yeah, exactly. Just to list off a few others, The Rainbow Fish is translated from German. The Adventures of Pippi Longstocking is translated from Swedish. All of Hans Christian Andersen's stories are translated from Danish. So yeah, a lot. It's definitely decontextualized. We have been reading translated books, and dealing with translation even if we're not aware of it. So my goal is to make sure that there's more access to translated literature. So I think, for the sake of time, I have more questions, but I just want to bring up a definition of a pedagogical framework called culturally sustaining pedagogy. Does anybody have a definition of that, or is anybody aware of that term? So culturally sustaining pedagogy was theorized, or it was come up with by Dr. Gloria Ladson-Billings, who came up with the culturally relevant pedagogy and culturally responsive teaching, and also Django Paris, who came up with culturally sustaining pedagogy. And this idea was also lovingly critiqued. That was in the title of the paper, a loving critique of by H. Sami Alim and Django Paris. So this framework states that the foundation for respectful and productive critique of previous formulations of asset pedagogies that change over time with the changing practices and lives of youth of color. It perpetuates and fosters linguistic, literate, and cultural pluralism as part of the democratic project of schooling and as a needed response to demographic and social change. It's a constant conversation embedded into all aspects of pedagogy. So basically, what this would entail is incorporating culture into all aspects of learning. So the way that I like to think of it is, if you're learning about culture in school, you could have a presentation. Everybody goes in to the auditorium and watches, for example, a African drumming concert, and the students might go there and say, "Oh, this is wonderful. We've never experienced anything like this before." And then the teacher takes them back to the classroom, and then they learn about math and they go about their day. So while the presentation was wonderful and they learned something new, it wouldn't be incorporated into their pedagogy. Whereas this idea of incorporating translated literature into the school system is they would take the books and put them into their libraries, and it would be right next to books that were originally written in English. So they'd always have accessibility to this kind of literature. So let's see, other questions. What do you think is important about incorporating this translated literature into elementary schools? So I have a few questions I can put in the chat here. How could this play a pivotal role in promoting justice, equity, and inclusion and diversity? How could this play into empathy and creating a welcoming, loving environment? And how would this reduce prejudice? How would this be actively anti-racist? And what kind of barriers would be broken down by doing this?
I think it's very welcoming when you have, when you're bringing in the languages of people who are in your classroom, when you're bringing in like cultural artifacts, elements, right? Because it just sort of is a sign of respect right away. And also, I think it just, it makes people feel valued.
For sure, definitely. See, if you, it's all about seeing yourself in what you consume. So if you only see, you can, if you see yourself in what you consume, then you can be empowered and realize that you have value in who you are and what your background is.
Yeah, I think that was so beautiful what you said, Missy, and I also feel, you know, there's a role for translated children's literature of you know, representation, but there's also this like imaginative act, right? So sometimes these books won't necessarily be about a particular country, right? They could be shapes, right? Or they could be something very abstract, but there's something in there, right? That's like, how do other people imagine, right? How do they react to the world imaginatively, which I always find really interesting too, like translating books that are really like pre-K books, right? Preschool books that are more, you know, abstract and about colors and shapes and symbols. And when you translate those, it's quite interesting because there's a different way, you know, maybe different authors from and illustrators from different worlds might play with those shapes or envision them. And so it's also understanding that there's different ways to imagine, and tying that into what you're asking about so beautifully about equity and social justice, is that there's different ways of imagining freedom, like freedom to express, freedom to think, diversity of images and diversity of ways to imagine a better world even. I don't know if that's super abstract, but definitely that comes to mind for me. Yeah.
Related to what you were just saying, Patricia, too, it seems like a lot of the words that come up when we talk about untranslatability are words around emotion and words around like certain types of social norms around how we interact with each other, right? Like can be the most difficult things to translate. And so that act of presenting students with like this work in translation also like at that formative stage like is also giving access to different ways of experiencing emotion, different ways of experiencing like what it means to be respectful to someone else that are not just limited to like acculturation within whatever language culture and local culture that students growing up in. I think, yeah, this is a cool conversation. I'm really enjoying it.
This is wonderful. Thank you guys so much for sharing. For the sake of time, if you can transition over to the shared document, we're just going to scroll underneath this purple box. And I thought I would share with you some examples of the books that I have read and reviewed. First, I have hyperlinks all over here, which hyperlinks are lovely. You can goes into so much more detail. The first thing I have on here is this mini booklet that I made last summer, and it has some book ideas in there. I had sent it out to schools and elementary schools and libraries in Rochester. And if you scroll down, I didn't include every single book that I have written reviews on, but just some of my favorites. So this translated books that I have read, this first category I would categorize as books that prompt discussion of situations in other parts of the world. So How War Changed Rondo. I actually read this not too long before the war broke out in Ukraine. And this book is written, it was published in the Ukraine as well. And then we have Nino's Poems for the Lost Children of Chile. And then also When Spring Comes to the DMZ. So when you read these books with children, you can talk about situations in other parts of the world that they might not be aware of. The children might say, what is the DMZ? And then you can discuss what's going on in North Korea and South Korea and the area in between, or the history, what happened to these lost children of Chile. And How War Changed Rondo, it's not specifically about Ukraine. It's about this place called Rondo, which is a place that has music and it's lovely, and then war comes and it's dark, and how do you make the light come back? So that would really prompt discussion of the parts of the world that the children might have no idea about, but they're able to read the story and see. And then the next category would be books that inspire newfound cultural joy. Like Summer Moonlight Concert was written in Chinese, and it talks about a family going outside and when the power goes out and playing instruments together and just having joy and dancing. So you get to learn about some of the traditional Chinese instruments in here. And it also comes with a CD where you can listen to the music too. I Am the Subway talks about the subway system in Korea. The Day Saida Arrived is about a girl who's from Morocco, and she comes to the an English-speaking area, and they get to learn about how her words were lost and how to find the words, and it's pretty much an homage to translating in general. And then, like Patricia was saying, sometimes it doesn't even talk about, sorry, what's that? Yes, if you click on the titles in the document, it will take you to a review of the book that I had written, and then it will take you to how to get these books or how to find them. But yeah, these following books that talk about difficult concepts, they might not even have to do with culture specifically, but they're written from someone who isn't from an English-speaking country, so their perspectives on these, so accessibility to these topics. So The Story of Baudry is about a dog's perspective of the Holocaust. Coffee Rabbit Snowdrop Lost is about dementia and dealing with lost memory. And One Day is talking about bereavement and how to get over the loss of a loved one. Mom is Hiding, The Mass That Love to Count, and Love in the Cat are all about the pandemic. So very recently, dealing with the pandemic from a child's perspective. Books that are fun and informative. Hans Christian Andersen, The Journey of His Life, is like a biographical story about Hans Christian Andersen talking about his life. Bruno the Beekeeper is very cute. It's all about the beekeeping process and how to make honey. The Three Water Drop Brothers, about the water cycle. And then the following books just exude joy. The Sato the Rabbit trilogy is my absolute favorite. We have Sato the Rabbit, the Moon, and Sato the Rabbit, A Sea of Tea. So lovely. Wants to find the magic in the world. Chiri and Chira, The Rainy Day. Chiri and Chira these are all, Sato the Rabbit and Chiri the Chira are originally written in Japanese. It's about, this one specifically is about, it's a rainy day and finding, I do love Sato so much, about the joy in a rainy day. Telephone Tales and Telling Stories Wrong are both stories written in Italian, very short little stories that can be told before going to bed. They're silly and they're playful and they're wonderful. And then under that, I have examples of different publishers that I've actually reached out to, and they sent me their books that I could review, but these were actually listed on the Eric Carle Museum list of translated literature for children. They actually had an exhibit, I think it's ended by now, but it was Read the World exhibit, and it's located in Amherst, Massachusetts. So I have the links to all of these wonderful publishers here. And then if you keep on scrolling down, we have initiatives, resources, and organizations. I was going to share a little presentation that I made today, but for the sake of time, you can just click on the hyperlink if you feel so inclined. But basically in this presentation, I was doing it for my first ever graduate class at Warner, which was Race, Class, Gender, and Disability in American Education. And we had to do an impacting project proposal. So my proposal was, how can we promote translated children's literature? Oh yes, I will send you the link. Let's see. How can we promote it in elementary schools? And basically, I had a two-step proposal. The first step is sourcing these books into the classrooms and libraries by reaching out directly to the publishers. And the second step is running translated literature workshops, translated outreach workshops in elementary schools. So what that means, it was actually something that Queen's College in Oxford, England has done with their students, but students who are studying maybe linguistics or the literary arts or education or something of the sort would go into elementary schools and run workshops on translated literature and the process of translating, and talk about just the joy of language and celebrate children who can speak more than one language. So workshops on all that kind of stuff. And actually today, in the little time we have left, we're gonna go into breakout rooms and start brainstorming, if we had to run these workshops, what would we do? And I have, if you keep on scrolling down, we have more resources. I would definitely promote Outside and World. I am currently running their Instagram account, so please follow them on Instagram. Little shout out. And just these wonderful initiatives in the UK, and also UMass Amherst has a translation center. And Regina Galasso at UMass Amherst and Amherst College is an advocate for translated children's literature as well. My email is also on here. If you want to stay in touch, please stay in touch. And then also all this literature that you can read about translation theory. So we're going to go into breakout rooms now and come back maybe around 11:15-ish, so about 10 minutes in breakout rooms. And I think we'll have exactly 4 groups, which is wonderful because that's what I had planned. So if you scroll down to the 5th step on here, we're going to do think, pair, share. So thinking, I'll share with you an idea that I had regarding translation outreach workshops. So if I were to make a plan, something I might do is take the book The Day Saida Came and read it with the students. So this is inspired by, I currently have an internship with an organization called the Reynolds Center for Teaching, Learning, and Creativity and Fable Vision Learning, which is run by the best-selling children's author Peter H. Reynolds. And they have an initiative called Start with a Story. So basically they start with a story and they read it to the kids, and then they have discussions and they have activities based on that. So if I were to do that for the workshop, I would read The Day Saida Came, and then I might do an activity such as tracing alphabets that aren't the Latin alphabet and seeing what that feels like. Or I might have a discussion about, here, I wrote this all down so I'd remember. How would you feel if you went to a new school and lost your words? Or how are some ways you can communicate with people that don't involve words as language? And then another activity would be the word picture telephone. So maybe saying a word and having someone draw it out, and then keep going with that process and seeing how that translates as you keep on going from student to student. So we're going to go into breakout rooms now. Hi everyone, I hope you all had fruitful conversations. I'm so excited to hear what you all came up with. I feel like it would be logical to go from group 1 to group 4 in order. So group 1, what did you come up with? Oh, Patricia, you're muted.
Mina, do you want me to speak or do you want to?
Go ahead, please.
Okay. All right, thank you so much. I mean, Katie, it took us a while to kind of, remember that we were doing a workshop. And just briefly, we felt the intro could be something about, well, first of all, to say Mina had a beautiful emphasis on a multilingual classroom. I think we were presuming a multilingual classroom in the first instance, so that there would be a lot of contribution from students who might be bilingual to talk about like the play, you know, the mix of words, right, that they're engaging with. And but briefly, starting with the intro of like how we learn about each other by sharing our stories. Like we do this in our own languages in our own countries. And then this is with a translated book, this is a story that somebody's sharing with us from another part of the world. And we're getting it via a translator. We were picturing an illustrated book, a multilingual classroom. Mina has a lot of work in her PhD on creativity. So she had a brilliant idea of having like a discussion section, but then an activity, a movement, a sort of acting out of, or I guess acting out isn't the word, a sort of, you know, bringing the book to life. So a movement activity. So we envisioned thinking of kindergartners and the need for movement, some listening, discussion, and like a movement activity. With the goal of students being able to appreciate stories from around the world, specifically the country of the book.
It is lovely. Thank you so much. And for the next 4 groups, we have until 11:25. So probably just like 1 minute. But thank you so much, Mina and Patricia. Next 3 groups, sorry.
Oh, sorry. Are we group 2, Jenny?
Yes.
Do you want to speak or do you want me to speak?
You can speak.
Okay, I'll try to be quick. We went with a story that we thought would have universal experience, but so we went with the 3 Little Pigs, and the idea of that, maybe if you could translate that with tactile experience, like even having something that's flimsy to something sturdy to something really substantial, and then having little kids be able to do that with trying to assemble anything in the room, either with no time, a little bit more time, and then lots of time. And then progressing that to say a 6th grader who maybe be asked to write a story in 1 minute, a story in 5 minutes, a story in 25 minutes, so that they could see that they could embellish it and make something more substantial. Because ultimately 3 Little Pigs is not really about the pigs and the wolf.
Thank you.
Is that right, Jenny? Yeah.
Okay, group 3.
I think that might be us.
Yeah.
Do you want me to go?
Yes, please.
So we, similar to the idea that was just discussed, we talked about the idea of taking children's books with pictures, removing all the text, and having students work from just the images to first just put 1 word on each page, and then put 1 sentence on each page, and then create a story. And then you could go back and translate that first word, but just as an exercise in terms of like the relationship between like language and story building.
That's lovely. Yes, actually, I think Queens College, one of their workshops had to do with like removing all the words and working with pictures. Really wonderful idea. Okay, lastly, group 4.
Do you want to share, Hannah? Or do you want me to do it?
You can take it.
So we had an idea to embody, we didn't choose a specific story, but we thought we would like to appeal to students who are interested in linguistics. So we thought a middle school group, and to choose 1 story, but break the class into different groups, perhaps take them outside or move the desks aside, and have them find ways to embody the story without using any spoken language. And then see each other's versions. So if it's the same story, but there's 3 or 4 groups, they see each other's versions so that you can see like the different ways that this could be interpreted, etc. That's kind of the gist of it.
I'm loving all of this. Thank you all so much for, I know I put you on the spot and I'm like, okay, come up with a lesson plan. And I know that can be a lot. But I think all these are something that could be implemented into schools and that children could gain a lot from. And I just want to leave you all with the next steps. So these are all ideas. How can we actually, bring these into elementary schools? And my plan is I'd love to collaborate with people in the United States interested in this, for example, Regina Glasso and Amherst, and other people interested in this field, and actually come up with a plan of submitting proposals to administrators. You can see all about it in the presentation I have hyperlinked in here in the doc, and actually bring this into real fruition. So that's what I'm hoping to see next. But I'm so glad I was able to speak with all of you today and such your wonderful perspectives and backgrounds. And thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to share with you all this for an hour.
Thank you. Thank you, Katie. Once again, an awesome year, a wonderful presentation. You're so fascinating. Love the work you're doing. And yay, education, because we have people like you who are going to be making changes. This is fantastic. So